Financial leadership is changing. CFOs no longer record history. They make history. This podcast will help you become a better leader, strategic thinker, and digital visionary. Welcome to Secrets of Rockstar CFOs, the ultimate podcast for chief financial officers. Follow along as Jack McCullough engages in exciting chats with accomplished CFOs, learning how they overcame obstacles and positioned their companies for the future. Here's your host, Jack McCullough.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs. I'm your host, Jack McCullough. By day, I'm the president of the CFO Leadership Council. You can follow us online at rockstarcfos.com. We have a great guest today, so let's rock. Our guest is Deanna Strable. Deanna is the CFO of Principal Financial Group. Deanna, welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs.
Thanks, Jack. Great to be here.
Been looking forward to it. And, I think probably a lot of people know PFG, but before we begin, you want to give the 10,000-foot view on the company you lead?
Yeah, so Principal Financial Group is a financial services company that's actually headquartered in Des Moines, Iowa. So Midwest roots there. Three main businesses. So we are a leader in retirement, primarily in the US, but also in select emerging markets in Latin America and Asia. We're a global asset manager. And then we offer insurance products, really focused on offering those products to small to medium-sized businesses here in the US. So think dental insurance, life insurance, disability insurance, with a keen focus again on that small to medium-sized business customer.
Great, thanks. And so we'll get back to that in a moment, but I always like to start off learning a little about your, our guests' early careers. So I know you had a classic Midwest upbringing. I believe you grew up in Iowa?
Yep. So I grew up about a half hour south of Des Moines, actually on a farm. So grew up in Iowa and ultimately then rotated to go to university in Chicago. So I went to Northwestern in Chicago. Never thought I'd come back to Iowa, and honestly, I've been here ever since I graduated.
Yeah, it's interesting. That must have been an interesting transition growing up from a farm to second biggest city in the United States? What was that like?
Yeah, Northwestern's actually in a northern suburb, and so you kind of feel like you're in a smaller part, but obviously had access to the city, which was great, and I loved that opportunity and enjoyed my 4 years there.
Okay, cool. And then you moved back to Iowa right after school, right?
Yeah. So I had interned at Principal, but still was thinking that I probably would go somewhere else in the United States. So I interviewed in places like, Hartford, Connecticut. I'm an actuary by background, so I was looking at more insurance-based companies, looked at Minneapolis, looked in St. Louis, but kept comparing all of those opportunities back to my experience here at Principal, and ultimately decided to start full-time here at Principal in Des Moines.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've noticed, it's a small sample, but Minneapolis and Iowa, I've noticed young people can't wait to leave. But then when they hit their 20s, they say, boy, it's such a great place to have a childhood, and they end up coming back. So anecdotal, but I see it over and over again. So
yeah, it is a very family-friendly place. And then personally, it also hit me that if I went somewhere else, all my vacations would be coming back home, visiting my family. And if I came to work here, I could actually take vacations and go other places. So there was some personnel elements there as well.
Yeah, I suppose that's a fair point. So cool. But you, when you were at Northwestern, you were a math major.
I was a math and econ double major. Yeah. So I went in either thinking I wanted to be an attorney or an actuary. But it was at a time where attorneys were struggling to find employment, and actuaries were actually finding very good job success. So the practical part of me said that was the route to go.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Both of them are, I never took the actuarial exam, but I know that it's brutal. But so, and your first job was as an actuary, right? I mean, out of college at PFG?
That's correct. Yeah, so for those of you that don't know about the actuarial career, you take a number of exams. It can take, 3 to 8, 9 years to finish that, but you're doing that while you're working. And so I started at principal, and really the first 5 or 6 years I was rotating to different parts of the company, including I actually went abroad and worked in Brussels for about 15, 16 months. But I was still taking my exams at that time as well.
Okay, well, that's brutal. So yeah, I know you lived in Belgium during a time, so that's a pretty brutal lifestyle, but well worth it. Are you still a licensed actuary to this day?
I am, yep.
Yeah.
I do still keep up on my public, my professional development and those types of elements. So I'm still a licensed actuary.
Interesting. So you've been at principal now for more than 3 decades.
That's correct.
And did you sort of envision it that way, or like when you joined, did you think this is the first step of many, or were you sort of thinking you wanted to put down some roots career-wise in a relatively early part of your career?
Yeah, I think if you talk me through the career, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what's next. But one of the reasons I did come to principal is that they did have a culture that they moved people around to different parts of the organization. They also had a culture where they took people that had more technical jobs, gave them opportunities more in the business, which I did take advantage of. So really the fact that I've had 12 or 14 roles during my 3 decades really has kept me here because it's given me a lot of different experience and continued to keep me challenged.
Yeah, that's the name of the game. Keep yourself challenged. So
Yeah,
it's 3 decades. I think it's fair to say you made a wise decision. So
yeah, great company.
good for you. And I'm just curious, obviously there's been a lot of changes since you joined, but what are some of the big ones with the company that you've observed and played a role in?
Yeah, I'd say probably the two biggest that I would mention is we went public in 2001. So prior to 2001, and again, I started here full time in 1990. So I had about a decade when we were not a public company. We were a mutual insurance company. And then we've had over 2 decades where we've been a public company. So that would be the first, probably one I would point out. The second one was really our entree into international operations and global operations. And that happened much closer to the start of my career here. But when we actually look at our employment base, for example, about half of our employees are actually outside of the US. And we have pretty significant operations in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. So that'd probably be the other one I'd point out.
Yeah, I knew you had a good global presence. I didn't quite realize that it was half your employees. So that's impressive. So, well, one thing that I've observed, and I wrote a book called Secrets of Rockstar CFOs, after which this podcast is named, but during that I interviewed about 20 CFOs, and every one of them cited the importance of a mentor or multiple mentors along the way. And I'm curious, did you have any mentors along the way? And sometimes the mentors don't even know that they're serving in that capacity, right? But did you have any that kind of stick out along the way that helped you along the journey?
Yeah, I have one in particular, and he became my leader when I actually left the actuarial realm and took my first, on a smaller scale, but my first profit and loss accountability. And he was my leader for a number of years. Then he became my peer, and he's now retired from the company. But two things I would really point out that it was very valuable. One, he came much more through an operations, more distribution and operations role. And so, just the learnings beyond the pure technical role into the more business aspects and the leadership aspects were really critical as I was moving into different roles. The second really important part that he served for me was as I was being asked to take on different roles, my initial response tended to be, no, I really like what I'm doing. I don't feel I've accomplished everything I need to accomplish. And he was a great sounding board, but probably more someone that kind of urged me and pushed me to take chances, helped me see the positives of those moves, and really kind of kept my eyes open and propelled me into some of those different roles, which was incredibly valuable as I sit here today.
Interesting. Yeah. And it's just so critical to have those types of relationships. And I'm guessing, given your career path, all that you've accomplished, there must be a lot of people that find you to be a very compelling mentor as well. Do you have any mentor type relationships right now?
Yeah, probably at any given time, I'm meeting informally with probably 5 individuals at Principal, as well as 1 or 2 people outside of Principal. We do have a formal mentorship program here, so maybe 1 of those slots or 2 of those slots are through our formal mentorship program, but the others are much more organic, where they've asked for some advice and then that's led to additional time spent. And ultimately then I learned tons, for those that are within Principal, it really does give me some broader insight into other parts of the company and how people are thinking about our strategy and our management team. But I love to give back and also give some mentorship to those individuals as well.
Yeah, that's the name of the game, right? You've achieved a certain level of
Yeah,
success, and it's time to return the favor that your mentor did for you. So,
yeah.
makes a lot of sense. I also want to chat. So probably the most important relationship is within most companies is between the CEO and the CFO. So I'm curious. Dan Houston's your CEO, I believe,
Yep,
and
Dan
I'm
Houston, yep.
curious. Oh, sorry, Houston. So my bad. I apologize. But I'm curious what your relationship with Dan is.
Yeah, so Dan and I have a very, I think, productive and strong relationship. So if you go back, we actually were peers for a period of time. He was, had been at the company longer, was at a little higher level, but he ran our retirement business and I ran our insurance businesses. And then ultimately he took on the president role where all the businesses came up through him. So he became my leader. But at that time, I wasn't in the CFO role. I was running one of our 4 major businesses. And then ultimately, he was the one that came to me and asked me to consider moving into the chief financial officer role. And ultimately, that did come to fruition in early 2017. He does an incredible job surrounding himself with complementary skill sets. He came up more through the sales organization, has very strong background there. Obviously, becoming a CFO has become very comfortable in lots of aspects of that role. But him and I have a great relationship where I can complement his strengths. I can challenge his perspectives. And ultimately, I think we get to really good solutions because of that ability to challenge. And we went through COVID together. We went through an activist investor and a pretty significant strategic review with our board of directors. And I think that has continued to even strengthen that relationship as well.
Okay, yeah, that's great that you have that type of mutual respect. I mean, not that most companies don't, but if you don't, there's just consequences throughout the business, even if you're both individually good at your jobs.
Yeah.
So that dynamic's critical. And then I'm curious at PFG, so what are some of the biggest, not only challenges, but maybe some of the biggest opportunities that are facing the organization?
Yeah, from an opportunities perspective and a little bit challenged, but when you think of COVID, you think of high interest rates and inflation. Finding ways that we can differentiate and grow faster than our peers is a constant challenge. Probably the one that faces us right now is when interest rates are at 5 and 6%. The majority of our business is offering, whether it be equities or fixed income or those types of asset management solutions. People, rightly so, are saying, why should I put my money into those types of vehicles when I can go to the local bank and get, a 1-year CD that's offering 5.5%? And so, we as the rest of the asset management business has had negative net cash flows over the last few years as customers look at those other opportunities as very attractive. So, I think that's been a challenge, but I think, again, we're focusing on how does that become an opportunity going forward. AI is another potential opportunity as we look at how can we leverage that within the company to meet the needs of our customers, find ways to be more productive, but do it in a very responsible way relative to generative AI. And I'd say every company's thinking through the opportunities relative to that.
Yeah, Gen AI for CFOs, it's a bit of a dilemma for you because, CFOs typically aren't the early adopters of any technology, and that undoubtedly there are some exceptions, but, every CFO I talk to, this is a game changer. You need to embrace it. On the other hand, you're also responsibility for data security, privacy, the cyber environment.
Yeah.
Balancing that for you on a personal level, really tough, right?
Yeah, so I partner really closely with our chief risk officer, and our chief information, our IT officer, so our CIO. And it's really us three kind of coming together to say, how do we do this in a very risk smart, responsible way? But how do we leverage it in the places where we're going to see the best opportunities for impact? I'd say 2023 was a lot of experimentation, and now we're trying to say, now that we've done that, and again, we're using our more private data, not public data, which is ultimately probably the biggest way you can control some of that risk. And we are doing some experimentation within finance, but probably are seeing places that have bigger outcomes and bigger potential impact outside of finance. But the role of the CFO and the role of the finance team is how can we model what those impacts could be, both the cost of implementing as well as the potential benefit, and ultimately helping in that prioritization process.
Yeah, it's good that no one's making these decisions in a vacuum, but it's tough because there's the recognition, look, if we don't embrace this, our competition is going to, and they're going to have maybe an advantage we can never overcome. But you need to be prudent about it too. You've got, especially in a company like yours, you've got the most confidential of information available, I would think.
Yeah.
So, but cool. But so I want to chat a little bit about your perception on the future of financial leadership. And when I started my career in the 1980s, often if you were a really good accountant with a little bit of business acumen, you could become a CFO. It was just a different environment, but now the roles become more strategic. It's more leadership, communications, digital savvy. But where do you see the role going in the future?
Yeah, I think it is going to continue to go down that path. And I'm going to take you back when I was assessing whether I wanted to move into the CFO role. I was running, again, one of our major businesses, obviously had interaction with strategy, our sales force, our customers, our IT strategy, our product strategy. And we had, if I looked at our former CFOs, they were both great, CFOs for the company, but they did come up through that financial route, and had more of, I'd say, that technical expertise that they were bringing into the role. And to be honest, my first response to Dan when he approached me was, I don't think this is a great fit for my skill set. And one of his responses at the time is, we really want to turn this role into a strategic CFO, not a technical financial CFO. Obviously, you have to have, financial skills. And, to be honest, over my time in this role, I actually had enterprise strategy reporting up through me. And ultimately having that connection was very, very important. And so, at the time, I don't know if I knew what strategic CFO meant. I simplified it by saying what it means is you're impacting the numbers, not just reporting the numbers. So that does get you into a lot of the strategic conversations. I have great people underneath me, whether it's my controller, whether it's my head of capital markets, they can own the technical pieces of it. But ultimately, I think the CFO is the business partner, whether it's my role or the business, our business unit CFO, their role is to be that partner to the rest of the management team. And to ultimately, bring the strategic, the financial, and the operational all together to help us make the best decisions for the future.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Because like when I interview investors, board members, CEOs, I ask, what is it that you're looking for in an elite CFO? They talk about the leadership, the strategic thinking, the partnering. I've even heard, the communication skills. I've heard
Yep.
empathy. It's relatively rare that somebody says, I'm
Yep.
looking for a great accountant in the role. And, you know, what's the secret to being a great CFO? Having a great controller or a chief accounting
Yep.
officer, if it might be,
Yep.
right? So, but
Yeah, and I
it
think on
makes
that
sense.
communication route, definitely that is critical as a public company as you're talking to your investors, both your current investors and prospective. But then internally, I spend a lot of time on our town halls with our employees, and those are employees that, are all the way from entry level up to C-suite. And so it becomes really critical of how do I make financials be understandable to the masses, and so that communication aspect is really important.
Yeah, it's a critical thing. So cool. Now, I wanted to ask, you're on the board of directors for a public company. Is it, I might be mispronouncing it. Is it Elevance?
It's Elevance Health, that's correct.
Oh, geez, not bad. So I'd love to learn a little about that. I'm guessing you're on the audit committee there?
I am on the audit committee. So I just
Okay.
joined a little over a year ago. And so had been approached a number of times and explored some opportunities. And to be perfectly honest, what had gotten in the way was calendars. As a CFO of a public company, obviously we're closing our books on a quarterly basis. And now this board that you're being asked to go on is closing their books on a quarterly basis. So that was kind of the first check that came, as our calendars actually lined up pretty well. But beyond that, the culture of the company, very similar. They're an Indianapolis-based company. They're much larger than Principal, so that gives a different approach as well. I'm on the audit committee and the nom and gov, but it's, I spend, quite a bit of my time interacting with the Principal board. And so the learnings I've seen both on even things like how AI is being used in other companies, but really critically, how another company management team interacts with their board has been very, very helpful to even improve some of our interactions here at Principal as well.
Okay, great. Fantastic. And I know in addition to being on a public company board, you also you volunteer quite a bit. You're with the United Way and Simpson College.
Yeah, that's correct. If I think back to my parents, they were always really involved in the community, in our church, and kind of giving back. And so that kind of core value stayed with me as I went through my career. And so United Way was one that Principal has always been a very strong supporter of. And so I started with more involvement in our local United Way here in Central Iowa. And then that progressed to being asked to be on the board of directors of more of the national and worldwide United Way as well. And then from a Simpson College perspective, it's a local college here in Central Iowa, close to where I grew up. And so I've been on that board as well for the last probably 15 years. And it's been great to stay connected to that avenue, but also give back some of my talents as well.
Cool. Well, that presents, so you're a public company CFO, which is quite a thing unto itself, and a public company audit committee member, and 2 boards. So work-life balance.
Yeah,
Possible?
it is possible. I tend to think, I term it work-life mix. It's how you put the two together and it still comes out and works in the end. I'm very organized, and which helps with this process. I also raised 2 children as I progressed. And for some of that, the public board, for example, the worldwide board, I didn't really, of United Way, I didn't entertain those 2 till after my kids had left and went to college. And so, obviously that took up some time when I was raising them and juggling their schedules. And so it's ultimately how do you make them work? And the reason I don't like balance is I never feel you are in balance, right? Because, if you take out sleeping time, you're probably at work more than you are at home, but how do you make the 2 work together? Again, principles and organization, diversity is very important, but flexibility and balance is also very important as well. It's more of, you got to get the work done versus where you get the work done or how you get the work done. And so I have morphed over time as my kids grew, how I do my work, when I do my work, and ultimately have figured out how to make that work, but still be, I think, productive in my role as a mother and a spouse, but also my role here from a professional perspective.
Both of your kids are in college?
I have one in law school and one in college, both outside of Iowa. Yeah, but they're both busy and part of that.
Okay, wow, yeah. So no dinners out on Friday nights for the next few years then if you're
Correct.
helping your kids do that. So
Yeah.
cool. I also am told that during COVID you started sort of a workout cohort just to it's and good for you because so many people who are busy executives don't find time to do it, but you started a group to kind of work out together. How's that? I'm curious what inspired you to do that and how it's working out.
Yeah, to me, taking some time to take care of yourself is needs to be a priority. As you kind of, I hate to say this, age, that becomes even more important. And I grew up, being very active, and so that was something that, but I'd gotten away from it, as my kids were growing up. And so I stepped back during COVID, and again, early COVID, you were stuck at home, you weren't doing anything. And I knew enough about myself that one, I didn't want to go to a gym and be with 40 other people. And two, I needed peer pressure, so I couldn't just do it on my own. And so I found a group of kind of like-minded women. So there was 5 of us that started. We're now at 4. And we found a gym that's more of a personal trainer perspective. And so we have a schedule 3 times a week, 2 evenings during the week, and then Saturday morning. Where we work out, and it's both social, but also making sure we're spending a little time taking care of ourselves.
Yeah, good for you. You've got to find out what works for you, right? People think I'm weird, but I have a decent sized office and I have a set of dumbbells and a yoga mat and a pull-up bar. And it takes away the I'm too busy excuse against working
Yeah,
out because
yeah,
they're here. I literally can work out without leaving my office. I can find 20 minutes if I'm really, really that busy, no matter how busy I
yeah.
am. So, but yeah, it's good that you found like a social group to make it. And, perhaps there's a little bit of peer pressure there too. You don't want
There
to
is
miss the
peer
meetings and
pressure. Yeah,
yeah, it's funny, no matter what age I get, and I'm now 60-ish, I just peer pressure still gets to me in certain instances. So, but well, good for you. I also know you're very passionate of advocating for women's leaderships.
yeah.
And I'm curious how you got involved in that and what that entails.
Yeah, so we have a number of resource groups here at Principal, supporting our diversity and inclusion efforts. And probably around 20 years ago, I was approached to actually start a women's leadership resource group. And, we have, actually, if you look at our C-suite today, we're 40 to 50% female. Our board of directors has been 40%, around that range female. So we have a lot of elements that support that. But if we went back that 20 years ago, there was a point where women were stalling out in kind of their advancement. And so myself and one other of our female leadership team was asked to start our women's leadership initiative. And that has continued to, my involvement in it has not continued, but that resource group has continued to this day and is really focused on, providing development opportunities, providing networking opportunities, and ultimately hoping to continue to advance women within leadership roles here at Principal. So it is something I'm passionate about. Recently, we've noticed that we kind of have the same thing happening within our finance organization. So we did actually this year kick off an initiative to do something more focused on females within finance. And making sure that we're providing those opportunities. So something, again, I'm passionate about. I think what I find is women tend to self-select out of opportunities. And so again, providing safe places for discussion, whether that's one-on-one in groups, and providing some encouragement is a big part of continuing to propel gender diversity within the workplace.
Yeah, it's interesting because our group is at the CFO Leadership Council, and we have about 2,200 members, and we're about, it's about 60-40, the ratio of men to women. However, if we were to only count professionals with less than 20 years experience, it's very slight majority female. And it seems like more women are entering the profession and staying in the profession. And a lot of those skills we talked about earlier, strategic thinking, leadership, communications, women excel in these areas. So I think it's probably going to, the future, financial leadership is going to be probably about gender equality. So
yeah, but it's interesting if you look at, I don't know the exact stat, but Fortune 500 CFOs, it's still very, very male dominated from that perspective.
Yeah, last time I looked, it was like 14%.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not counting numbers. I'm not saying it has to be 50-50 by any stretch of the imagination, but when it's 14% in 2023, I think there's some, I think it's not unfair to say we can do better than that.
Totally agree.
Cool. But okay, so I'd want to ask for some advice you might have for the next generation of CFOs. And you actually, on your own LinkedIn profile, I thought you'd give some good advice. But what's the advice you can share for the next gen?
Yeah, Jack, I think it comes back to what we talked about earlier, which is that broader strategic skill set that CFOs need to have. And so for early in career people, one of the things I talk about is having curiosity. And so it's having kind of those critical thinking skills, but also curiosity that when you're asked to do something, you're not just doing it, but you're trying to connect the dots to the broader, organization. If, for example, you're being asked to price a product, which again in the actuarial realm is something that is common, how much do you understand the competition? How much do you understand the sales process? How much do you understand the target customer and what their buying decisions are? And so that's going to force you to understand kind of the broader picture, but also influence how you think about how you successfully complete the pricing activity that's in front of you. So that curiosity and critical thinking skills is important. And then I think the other one is just allowing and putting yourself in the place to be outside your comfort zone. Again, public speaking was not something I loved earlier in my career. To be honest, I physically got sick when I had to speak in front of large amounts of people. And now I do it every day, right? And so, putting yourself out there in kind of not those comfortable places, moving to Europe, very early in my career, I didn't have a passport, honestly didn't even really know where Belgium was. Moving outside the actuarial realm, those are all examples of things that weren't comfortable. But if I look back, were really, really critical aspects of my career.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's great advice. And you mentioned the customer, right? Just that's the reason we're in business, right? So if you want to be part of the C-suite, any part of the C-suite, gosh, if you don't understand what the customer is looking for, you're going to have some inherent struggles in your role, I would think. So cool. Well, I always like to conclude these with some fun facts about the individual. And I know your team shared a few with me, but what are some fun facts about you? Maybe things that people would find a little bit surprising.
Yeah. So I'm an avid college sports fan. I grew up playing sports. My parents were college fans. And I've continued that passion today. Kind of going back to that male dominant orientation of some of the areas that I interact. Honestly, having that passion has been helpful. There's common communication and conversation items that you can have, and you don't just have to be a golfer. There's other things that you can do. But I'm a huge Northwestern Wildcat fan. I'm a huge Iowa Hawkeye fan, football, basketball, men, women. So that's something that's important. And it also has my son was a basketball player, so a good connection with my child as well. The other one, I think I do love to travel. I love I enjoy wine. And so I love to actually put those two together. And my husband and I like to take trips that to our different wine location, our regions around the world. And hopefully we'll continue to do that going forward.
Cool. I heard you're a headbanger. Any truth to
I
that, or
don't think it's
alternative
a
rock?
headbanger. So
Okay.
but probably my favorite genre of music is alternative rock. Green Day is probably the best concert I've ever been to, and I've seen them a couple of times in concert. And so, yeah, I tend to like, again, not heavy metal, but I do like that alternative rock perspective.
Yeah, well, I'm a headbanger to this day. My favorite band is AC/DC.
Yeah.
Because they were my favorite band in the 70s and 80s. Why would I ever
Yeah.
evolve? But
Yeah.
that's how this podcast came to be named. When I wrote the book, I wanted it to be about CFOs, but something that reflected my personality. So Rockstar CFOs seemed to be it. But
Awesome.
cool. But I have to ask you, you mentioned Iowa and Northwestern.
Yeah.
Who do you root for when they play each other? You get divided
I
loyalty
am
there, right?
I hate that game, right? And part of it is because my son, again, is a huge Hawkeye fan. Usually when they play, there is one playing for something and one not playing for something. And so that makes it easy. I'll root for the one playing for something. And honestly, if they are both playing for something, I give the slight nod to my alma mater and root for Northwestern.
Okay, yeah. The divided loyalty. I went to Suffolk University, which perhaps you're not familiar with. And then grad school, I went to MIT Sloan. Not exactly athletic powerhouses.
Yeah. Well,
there.
and Northwestern was not a power. I saw them win once in 4 years in football when I was
Yeah.
there. They've had
One
more
game?
recent one game.
I don't mean to lie.
So they were not a powerhouse. So I've enjoyed seeing them become more successful over the last few decades.
Nice. Well, MIT obviously is not, but they did something. I'll go on a limb and say no school will ever do again. They made the Division III Final Four in men's basketball. But what they did, all 12 of the players on the team were high school valedictorians.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was
I
the
think
coach
that's
was like,
unusual.
the coach was like, it's tough to get them to, study the playbook.
Yeah.
They're studying other things. What are you going to do,
Yeah.
right? So cool. And Bertie also told me in your youth, you sold sweet corn.
I did. So again, probably not tons of CFOs could put that on their bio. I don't put it on my bio because one, I despised it, and two, I only did it once. But we did live on a farm. My dad got a whim one year to grow a lot of sweet corn, much more than we could use as a family or give to family members. So we actually, set up the pickup on a corner, opened up the back, had tons of sweet corn. I was in high school and I was so embarrassed that someone from high school was going to drive by and see me there. But I did do it once and can say I did that.
All right. So good for you. So cool. Well, Deanna, this has been a lot of fun and, more importantly, some great content for our listeners. So thank you so much. I know you got a lot going on. So thanks for making the time. And I want to give you the final word.
Yeah. I think the critical piece is CFO is a business leader in the organization. And so the more you can approach it like that, but to me also make sure I understand my responsibilities and how it fits in outside of the company, your family, your community. Those are aspects that are critical as well as you think about your legacy as you go through your career.
Thank you for listening to this episode. To continue your exploration of this role that focuses on strategy, leadership, finance, and technology, listen to more episodes of the show at rockstarcfos.com. Join this revolution, episode by episode. Push yourself to achieve great things and unlock the best opportunities available to you. CFOs are creating a legacy, and it's time for you to leave your own unique imprint on the world today. That's all for now. See you on the next one.